Somewhere in your prayers there is a signature, and it may not be God's. A forger doesn't start with a blank page. He starts with the real thing, the original signature, and he studies it. Not for a day, for years. He learns the pressure of the pen, the tiny hesitation before the last letter, the slope of the hand. He practices until the copy is so close that even the person who owns the real signature would hesitate before calling it fake. And then he signs it onto something that was never authorized, a check, a contract, a name on a document that grants him exactly what he wanted all along. Here is the part nobody tells you. Most forgers don't think of themselves as criminals. They think of themselves as people who simply needed the signature to say yes. Now sit with that for a second, because somewhere inside your devotion, the same thing may be happening. Not with a pen, with prayer. You didn't wake up one day and decide to reject the true God. That's rare. What's common, what's almost universal, is something quieter. You took the real one, the one who says no when you want yes. The one who is silent when you want comfort. The one who calls you to die to yourself when you want to be affirmed. And slowly, prayer by prayer, request by request, you began practicing a version of him that always signs in your favor. A God who never disappoints you because he was built not to. This is the part that should make you uncomfortable, because the test for this isn't loud. It's not whether you go to church. It's not whether you can quote a verse. The test is simpler and far more dangerous. When God says no to you, do you feel corrected or do you feel betrayed? Because if disappointment in God ever turns into resentment toward God, that's not weak faith. That's the moment the forged signature gets exposed for what it is. And here's where it gets heavier. A forged signature doesn't just deceive the person reading it. It quietly disqualifies you from the real account behind it. You can carry that forged document into the bank of your own soul for years. It can feel official. It can feel sincere. It can even feel spiritual. But sincerity was never the standard for whether a signature is real. Accuracy is. And the longer a forged signature goes undetected, the more confidently it gets used, which means the lie doesn't stay small, it compounds. This isn't a new problem dressed in new language. Exodus 32 records the oldest version of it. The people didn't say, "Let's abandon God." They said, "Make us a God who will go before us," and then they called the calf they built by his name. They weren't worshiping nothing. They were worshiping something they had shaped with their own hands and then signed his name onto. That is the first forged signature in Scripture, and it has been copied ever since, generation after generation, just with different materials. Gold then, comfort now, approval now, control now. So ask the uncomfortable question honestly. When you picture God being pleased with you, what does that picture actually require of you? If the honest answer is nothing that costs me anything, pause there. Because the true God, the one whose actual signature exists in Scripture, has never once required nothing. He required a temple be torn down and rebuilt in 3 days. He required a rich man to sell what he loved. He required a city to forgive an empire that destroyed it. The real signature always costs something, because the real God is never merely useful. A forged God, on the other hand, is endlessly useful, which is exactly why it's so easy to keep using one without ever checking if it's real. Here is the recontextualizing moment. the one that should rearrange how you've been reading your own spiritual life. The danger was never that you'd start worshiping a totally different God with a different name. The danger was that you would keep using his name while quietly editing what he's allowed to ask of you. That is not a loss of faith. That is faith laundering through a name that still feels sacred. And once you see that, you cannot fully unsee it. Every prayer you've prayed gets re-examined. Every time God's silence felt like abandonment instead of discipline. Every time his command felt outdated instead of holy. Every time you softened a hard verse until it agreed with you instead of confronting you. Each of those moments is a stroke of the pen practiced quietly until the forgery became fluent. This is where most people want comfort, and comfort is exactly what cannot be offered here, because comfort is how the forged signature survives. What can be offered is verification, the only thing that has ever exposed a forgery. Go back to the original document, not your memory of God. Not the version of him your culture, your pain, or your preferences have edited, the actual text. The actual demands, the actual cost he named out loud, and the actual cross he paid it on. Compare the signature in your prayers to the signature in his word, line by line, without flinching at the parts that don't match. This is the moment of reckoning, and it is not meant to destroy you, it is meant to recover what's real. Because here is the staggering mercy underneath all of this. Forged documents get shredded. Forged faith does not have to. There's a way to take the false signature back to the one whose name was stolen, and instead of prosecution, he offers correction. He doesn't erase you for the forgery. He invites you to learn his actual hand, stroke by stroke, until your life starts signing an agreement with his will instead of forcing his name onto yours. That is not a smaller faith. That is the first faith that was ever real, because for the first time the signature finally matches. And once you start verifying instead of assuming, you will notice the forgery doesn't only live in your prayers. It lives in the sermons you trust, the comfort you call peace, the silence you call abandonment. The real signature is still out there, waiting to be checked against everything you have believed was already settled, and that examination has only just begun.